Some of Hollywood's biggest stars didn't just drink too much, they became dangerous when they drank. They picked fights, threatened people, destroyed marriages, wrecked cars, and sometimes left innocent people paying the price. What makes these stories disturbing is that many of these men and women were still celebrated as beloved stars while their private lives were spiraling out of control. Some lost their careers, some lost everything they had built, and a few never lived long enough to recover. These are 11 old Hollywood stars whose drinking turned fame, talent, and privilege into something far darker. Number 1. Lawrence Tierney. Between 1944 and 1951, the Los Angeles Police Department arrested Lawrence Tierney at least 12 times. For his employer, RKO Pictures, every single one of those arrests was a localized PR emergency. The studio had built Tierney's reputation on his portrayal of the ruthless bank robber John Dillinger. The entire marketing strategy relied on selling audiences a tough, menacing screen presence. But the unspoken rule of the Hollywood machine was that the danger was supposed to stop the moment the director called cut. Tierney missed that memo entirely. While RKO was printing posters of him looking intensely into the camera, their studio fixers were quietly working behind the scenes, bailing him out of jail, paying off local businesses, and trying desperately to keep his booking photos out of the morning papers. Tierney wasn't just having a few drinks and getting loud. He was ripping payphones out of walls and assaulting waiters with sugar bowls when they refused to serve him more alcohol. The friction here is between a publicity department that thought it could manufacture and control a bad boy image and a man who was actually a danger to the public. It is relatively easy for a studio to cover up a quiet addiction or a private scandal. It is nearly impossible to spin a story when your leading man is repeatedly serving jail time, including a 90-day sentence for breaking a student's jaw in a bar. RKO and other studios eventually had to cut their losses. Tierney himself later acknowledged that he threw away about 7 careers because of his drinking. The studio system could manufacture and protect almost any illusion, but it simply couldn't protect a man who refused to be managed. Number 2. Robert Mitchum. There is a distinct line in Hollywood between a marketable rebel and an uninsurable liability. For years, the studio publicity machine successfully walked that line with Robert Mitchum. Unlike Tierney, Mitchum's heavy drinking was partially baked into his public persona. The press agents sold him as the ultimate heavy-lidded, detached outsider. Whispers of him drinking scotch from a water glass all day were treated almost like character-building lore. A bar fight that allegedly put a heavyweight boxer in the hospital was something the PR departments could quietly handle, or even subtly spin to reinforce his tough guy image. But the tolerance of the Hollywood system is directly tied to the production schedule. In 1955, the carefully curated image of the cool Hellraiser shattered during the pre-production of Blood Alley. Mitchum's drinking escalated to a point where he wasn't just a headache for press agents, he was threatening the operational stability of the film. Accounts from the location accused him of causing massive disruptions, culminating in an incident where he supposedly threw the production's transportation manager into San Francisco Bay. Mitchum denied the specifics, but the studio couldn't hide the aftermath. They fired him and flew in John Wayne as an emergency replacement. You also can't PR your way out of closed-door executive meetings. During a casting sit-down with powerhouse producer David O. Selznick, Mitchum reportedly admitted to downing 8 double scotches before urinating on the producer's carpet. He did not get the part. The studio system wanted audiences to believe Mitchum was just a carefree nonconformist. In reality, the alcohol frequently stripped away his professionalism, turning a highly bankable star into a volatile, expensive presence that even the most powerful fixers in town struggled to contain. Number 3. George C. Scott. The entertainment industry frequently confuses volatility with genius. George C. Scott was revered for an on-screen intensity that felt entirely authentic. But the prevailing PR narrative that he was simply a deeply passionate, uncompromising artist provided excellent cover for a man whose alcohol-fueled aggression made him genuinely dangerous in private. When a celebrated actor trashes a dressing room, publicists can usually write it off as the burden of the creative process. They manage the fallout from bar fights by quietly paying for the damages and keeping the police out of the papers. But the violence Scott directed at those closest to him couldn't be easily spun as artistic temperament. The reality of Scott's drinking is clearly documented through his relationship with Ava Gardner. While gossip columns of the era often tried to paint their connection as a fiery, dramatic Hollywood romance, Gardner's own accounts describe a much darker environment. She recounted multiple instances of Scott breaking into her hotel rooms while highly intoxicated. The physical threat he posed was direct. During one specific conflict, Scott reportedly smashed a glass bottle and threatened her with the jagged edge. Gardner detailed physical assaults and accused him of trying to violently intimidate her into marriage. For a long time, the press and the studios were willing to separate his undeniable acting brilliance from his off-screen behavior, effectively shielding him from real consequence. Scott later admitted his heavy drinking was a severe addiction and eventually required clinical treatment. But before that intervention, the label of the intense, tortured actor was largely just a polite industry term for a man who terrified the people trapped behind closed doors with him. Number 4. Spencer Tracy. Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer sold Spencer Tracy to the American public as the ultimate moral compass. On screen, he was the wise judge, the reliable patriarch, the man of unwavering integrity. But when the cameras stopped rolling, Tracy frequently disappeared into severe, prolonged drinking binges that actively endangered himself and anyone in his immediate vicinity. His drinking wasn't a functional daily habit, it was explosive. He would vanish for days or weeks at a time, tearing through hotel rooms and bars in violent, unpredictable states. For MGM's publicity department, led by the legendary fixer Howard Strickling Tracy, was a constant operational hazard. When he went on a bender, the studio had to dispatch literal search parties to find him. They deployed teams to quietly pay off damages to trashed hotel suites, settle accounts with battered establishments, and ensure that any potential police reports miraculously disappeared before the morning edition. The danger he posed while intoxicated was entirely physical, often becoming combative and completely detached from reality. Yet, the industry machinery worked so efficiently that the ticket-buying public had absolutely no idea. While studio fixers were actively sweeping up the wreckage of his latest blackout, the press magazines were running heavily curated articles about his quiet dignity and grandfatherly wisdom. The industry's ability to maintain this towering facade of American morality while constantly managing a highly volatile and destructive man remains one of the most aggressive and successful public relations cover-ups in Hollywood history. Number 6. Richard Burton. The press loved to frame Richard Burton as a force of nature, a passionate Welsh poet with an epic, insatiable appetite for life. This romanticized image wasn't just lazy journalism, it was a very necessary survival strategy for the studios. When a lead actor is regularly consuming multiple bottles of hard liquor a day, you cannot sell him to investors as a reliable professional. You have to sell him as a legend. For the film industry, Burton was a massive financial gamble. The reality was that his heavy drinking didn't just make him a difficult artist, it made him a volatile liability who routinely paralyzed multi-million-dollar international productions. While publicists worked overtime to craft narratives about his brilliant theatrical temperament, the crews on his sets had to manage a man who was frequently aggressive, completely unpredictable, and capable of halting filming for days at a time. Nowhere was this PR maneuvering more evident than in his relationship with Elizabeth Taylor. The media heavily packaged their union as the glamorous romance of the century. But behind the glossy magazine spreads their alcohol-fueled conflicts were deeply destructive. Entire hotel suites were frequently demolished. The fights were so intense that studio minders and personal staff lived in constant anxiety, genuinely worried about the physical safety of their most valuable stars. The industry tolerated the chaos because for a long time, Burton could stumble onto a set and still deliver a masterful, commanding performance. But you can only frame chaos as passion for so long. Eventually, the PR machine couldn't hide his visible physical decline, nor could they completely obscure the fact that being in his orbit meant stepping into a highly dangerous blast radius. Number 7. Oliver Reed. In the British entertainment industry, severe alcoholism was often rebranded under the guise of hell-raising charm. For decades, the media actively enabled Oliver Reed packaging his highly destructive behavior as eccentric, robust masculinity. Talk shows invited him on specifically to watch him drink, and tabloids treated his violent outbursts as amusing anecdotes. But this public romanticization of the lovable rogue masked a man who was a genuine physical threat in any room he entered. The reality of Reed's drinking wasn't a quirky pub story. It was consistently dangerous. He was notorious for inciting brutal physical altercations, one of which resulted in a severe slashing across his face that permanently altered his appearance. Yet instead of treating this as a critical safety issue, the industry simply folded the physical scars into his tough guy persona. Producers continued to finance his projects, knowing full well that bringing Reed onto a location meant accepting the constant risk of halted schedules, property damage, and physical intimidation. The most striking aspect of Oliver Reed's career is how entirely complicit the media machinery was in his decline. They didn't just cover up his volatility, they actively monetized it. By framing his aggressive, alcohol-fueled instability as a cinematic badge of honor, the press stripped away any accountability. They built a lucrative brand out of his danger, ensuring that a man slowly destroying himself was consistently applauded for it by the very public that bought the tickets. Number 8. Broderick Crawford. Every week, millions of Americans tuned in to watch Chief Dan Matthews lay down the law to reckless drivers on the hit television series Highway Patrol. But the man delivering those stern lectures, Broderick Crawford, couldn't even legally drive the police cruiser he was sitting in. By the time Crawford was starring as the undisputed face of highway safety, his heavy drinking had already caught up with him. He had been arrested for driving under the influence in Los Angeles as early as 1952, and his habits didn't change once the show became a hit. For the network's publicity team, this was a worst-case scenario. A drunk driving arrest for the star of a law enforcement show wasn't just a minor tabloid headache. It was a hypocrisy that could instantly kill their sponsorships. So the production simply faked the reality to protect the investment. When Crawford's driver's license was inevitably suspended, the crew resorted to television magic. They shot his driving scenes on private roads or placed the police car on a towed flatbed trailer to maintain the illusion of control. The PR machine kept pushing his image as the ultimate authority figure, deliberately hiding the fact that he was the exact type of hazard his character was supposed to pull over. They successfully fooled the viewing public, but they couldn't hide it from local law enforcement. The real California Highway Patrol was reportedly so familiar with Crawford's off-screen driving habits that they nicknamed him Old 502, a direct reference to their radio code for a drunk driver. The network spent years manipulating the camera angles to protect a fictional safety icon, effectively shielding a man who was an active threat on the roads he only pretended to protect. Number 9. Gail Russell. When Paramount Pictures signed Gail Russell at just 18 years old, their publicity department immediately weaponized her severe stage fright. They marketed her as Hollywood's ultimate delicate ingenue, so shy and innocent that audiences naturally felt the urge to protect her. What the studio carefully kept out of the fan magazines was how she was actually surviving the crushing pressure of the cameras. To get through a shooting schedule, Russell relied on heavy, consistent drinking. For years, studio fixers quietly managed the fallout, desperate to maintain the highly profitable illusion of the pristine, quiet girl. But self-medicating a severe anxiety disorder cannot be contained by press agents forever. By the mid-1950s, the gentle starlet the studio had promised the public was actively endangering the community. The PR shield officially cracked in 1953 with a drunk driving arrest, but it completely shattered 2 years later when she struck a vehicle carrying a couple and their baby. The absolute failure of her manufactured image was on full display in July 1957. At 4 in the morning, Russell drove her car directly into a Beverly Boulevard restaurant, injuring a working janitor. She couldn't even make her subsequent court appearance because she was found unresponsive at home, completely incapacitated by alcohol. Paramount's machinery knew exactly how to commodify a terrified teenager. But by hiding her very real crisis behind a marketable facade, they enabled a downward spiral that eventually made her a genuine physical danger to the city. When she died at just 36, the studio that once meticulously curated her every move was long gone, leaving behind only the wreckage of an image they couldn't control. Number 10. William Holden. William Holden wasn't the kind of drinker who smashed up hotel rooms or threw punches at directors. He was a functional, highly respected professional, which made his particular brand of danger much harder for the public to spot. For decades, the industry protected his reputation. The image of the rugged, dependable American leading man was simply too valuable to tarnish with the messy reality of severe alcoholism. To the press, he was often just portrayed as a seasoned star who enjoyed his liquor, a polite fiction that masked a deeply ingrained dependency. The protective bubble of his celebrity completely burst in 1966 on a road near Pisa, Italy. While behind the wheel of a Ferrari, a highly intoxicated Holden collided with another vehicle. The crash resulted in the death of the other driver, Valerio Giorgio Novelli. In almost any other profession, a vehicular manslaughter charge would mean immediate ruin. But the Hollywood machinery, combined with his sheer star power, insulated him from the harshest realities of the justice system. He received an 8-month suspended sentence and quietly settled with the victim's family. The entertainment press rarely lingered on the fact that a beloved movie star had caused a fatal accident. The industry simply kept hiring him, effectively enabling the behavior that caused the disaster in the first place. The same isolation and drinking that the industry helped conceal eventually caught up to him. When he died alone in his apartment years later, authorities concluded it was the result of a fall while highly intoxicated. His public image easily survived a fatal collision, but the man himself could not survive the addiction that caused it. Number 11. Gig Young. For decades, Hollywood typecast Gig Young as the ultimate harmless, affable playboy. He was the breezy best friend in romantic comedies, a charming presence that audiences found entirely safe. The publicity departments leaned heavily into this light-hearted image, creating a polished veneer that completely obscured a severe, escalating dependency on alcohol. Behind the effortless smile, the industry was quietly dealing with a man whose physical and mental stability was crumbling. The reality of his condition occasionally bled into public view, most notably when he was fired on the very first day of shooting Blazing Saddles, because he was physically collapsing from severe alcohol withdrawal. Yet the entertainment press largely treated his addiction as a quiet personal struggle rather than a sign of deep psychological decay. The studios continued to politely gloss over the severity of his decline, preferring to maintain the illusion of the sophisticated, Oscar-winning gentleman. But in 1978, the terrifying gap between the studio-manufactured charm and the dark reality of his condition finally closed. Inside a Manhattan apartment, the decades of masked instability culminated in a fatal act of violence that claimed the lives of both Young and his newlywed wife, Kim Schmidt. The Hollywood PR machine had spent a lifetime convincing the public that Gig Young was simply a sophisticated entertainer with a polite drinking habit. In reality, the charm was an incredibly effective disguise for a man who eventually became the most dangerous person in the room. When the facade finally broke, there was no press release left to write and no way to hide the ultimate devastating cost of the industry's illusions.